The production floor fell silent. 9 years of precision work, thousands of aerospace matrix valves built to perfection, and it all came down to this moment. My fingers moved across the control panel one last time, powering down each rekey with the same careful attention I'd given them every single day since I started at Titan Aerospace. The hum of machinery that had been the soundtrack to nearly a decade of my life began to fade. Then, one by one, the production cores across the entire site went dark. Welcome to the Payback Office channel, where workplace justice isn't just a concept. It's a reality that unfolds when people finally decide enough is enough. If stories like this resonate with you, consider joining our journey to 7,000 subscribers. Every subscription helps us share more stories of workplace accountability and the moments when the underestimated prove everyone wrong. My name is Bryn Sutt, and for 9 years, I was the senior matrix valve technician at Titan Aerospace's primary manufacturing facility in Wichita, Kansas. The title might sound technical, but the work was art, constructing the intricate valve systems that regulate pressure in spacecraft components. One mistake, one miscalculation, and millions of dollars and countless lives could be at risk. It wasn't just a job, it was a calling. I didn't come from money or connections. My father worked at a grain elevator, and my mother cleaned houses to help make ends meet. They taught me that work ethic and integrity mattered more than titles or status. They showed me that understanding people, really seeing them, was worth more than any promotion. That foundation made me good at my job, but it also made me vulnerable to someone like Beatrice Carrington. Beatrice was my lead supervisor, and she'd been with Titan for 15 years when I arrived fresh out of technical college. In the beginning, she seemed like exactly the kind of mentor I needed: demanding, precise, unwilling to accept anything less than perfection. I respected that. I wanted to learn from someone who took the work as seriously as I did. The first few years were everything I'd hoped for. Beatrice taught me the nuances of valve construction that you couldn't learn from any manual. She showed me how to read the metal, how to anticipate stress points before they appeared in any diagnostic, how to troubleshoot problems that hadn't even fully materialized yet. Under her guidance, I went from a nervous rookie to someone the other technicians came to for advice. By year 3, I was handling the most complex assemblies on the floor. The Delta Series valves, components so intricate that only 5 people in the entire facility were certified to work on them, became my specialty. I developed a modification to the calibration process that reduced testing time by 40% without sacrificing any accuracy. Beatrice presented it to upper management. She presented it under her name. I told myself it didn't matter. She was the lead, after all. The improvement benefited the whole team, and that's what counted. When she got a commendation and a bonus for the innovation, I swallowed my disappointment and kept working. My parents had taught me that good work speaks for itself. Eventually, someone would notice. By year 5, our department had the highest efficiency rating in the company. Quality control flags on our valves were virtually non-existent. We were the benchmark other facilities tried to match. Beatrice received another promotion, another raise, another plaque for her office wall. I received a standard cost of living increase and a certificate of appreciation printed on cardstock. The pattern continued. I developed a training protocol that reduced new technician onboarding time from 6 months to 3. Beatrice presented it at a regional conference. When I created a diagnostic checklist that caught a critical flaw in a supplier's raw materials, potentially saving the company from a catastrophic product recall, Beatrice was the one who got called into the executive meetings. One afternoon, a supplier representative arrived unannounced to dispute my findings. He marched onto the production floor with Beatrice trailing behind him, waving a sheaf of certification documents. "Your lead here says there's a problem with our titanium alloy," he announced loudly. "I've brought our complete quality assurance records. This is premium-grade material." Beatrice looked at me, panic flickering in her eyes before she masked it. "Bryn, can you show the gentleman the test results?" I pulled up the spectrographic analysis on my workstation. The certification says this is grade 5 titanium alloy, but the aluminum content is 0.3% too high. That's within commercial tolerances, but not aerospace standards. At high altitudes, the thermal expansion differential would cause microfractures in the valve housing within 6 months. The supplier's face reddened. That's impossible, our process is. I can run the analysis again right now, if you'd like to observe. Beatrice stepped in smoothly. I think that's an excellent idea. We need to be absolutely certain before we reject an entire shipment. I ran the test again with the supplier watching every step. The results were identical. The aluminum content was off-spec. The supplier left without another word, and 2 days later, Titan received a formal apology and a replacement shipment at no cost. Beatrice got a letter of commendation from the VP of Procurement for identifying the defect before it entered production. Then came year 7, and everything shifted. Beatrice started arriving late and leaving early. Her attention to detail, once razor-sharp, became sporadic. She'd approve specifications without reviewing them, sign off on quality checks without performing them, delegate crucial decisions to me, and then question my judgment in front of others. The woman who'd once been meticulous to the point of obsession seemed to be going through the motions. I picked up the slack because that's what the work required. Someone had to maintain standards, and if Beatrice wasn't going to do it, I would. I covered for her missed meetings, completed her reports, handled the supplier negotiations she'd suddenly lost interest in. The other technicians noticed, but no one said anything. Titan had a culture of loyalty to leadership, even when leadership didn't deserve it. A critical situation arose when one of our major clients scheduled an emergency audit. Their spacecraft had experienced a minor valve malfunction during testing, nothing catastrophic, but enough to trigger a comprehensive review of all our production processes. The audit was scheduled for a Wednesday. Beatrice called in sick Tuesday morning. I received the email at 6 a.m. Not feeling well, you'll need to handle the client audit. All the documentation is in the shared drive. BC. The documentation wasn't in the shared drive. I spent 2 hours tracking down certification records, test results, and production logs while the audit team waited in the conference room. When I finally joined them, the lead auditor, a stern woman named Andrea Wolf, looked at her watch pointedly. We were told the department lead would be presenting, she said. Miss Carrington is ill. I'm Bryn Sutton, Senior Matrix Valve Technician. I'll be walking you through our processes today. The audit lasted 6 hours. Andrea questioned every procedure, every specification, every quality control checkpoint. She asked technical questions that would have stumped most engineers. I answered every single one, pulling up data, demonstrating equipment, explaining the metallurgical principles behind our material choices. At the end, Andrea closed her laptop and looked at me directly. How long have you been doing this work? 9 years. And Miss Carrington has been your supervisor that entire time. Yes. Andrea made a note in her file. Your processes are excellent. The attention to detail is exactly what we need. This facility remains certified for our contracts. When Beatrice returned the next day, she thanked me briefly for handling the audit, then sent an email to upper management describing how her department's robust procedures had passed the stringent review with flying colors. By year 8, I was essentially running the department while Beatrice collected the credit. She'd show up for the important meetings, the client tour, the executive presentations, always perfectly prepared because I'd prepared everything for her. Then she'd disappear back into her office while I kept the production floor running. I should have gone to upper management. I should have documented everything and made my case. But I kept thinking about my parents, about the values they'd instilled in me. Humility, service, the belief that doing the right thing mattered more than getting recognition for it. I told myself I was being noble. Really, I was being naive. The breaking point came 3 months ago when Titan announced a major expansion. They were opening a new facility in Huntsville, Alabama, and they needed someone to head up the matrix valve division. It was the kind of opportunity that came once in a career. A chance to build an entire department from the ground up, complete autonomy, a significant salary increase, and relocation assistance. I knew I was qualified. I'd been doing the work of a department head for 2 years already. My technical skills were unmatched, my efficiency numbers were exceptional, and I had the respect of every technician on the floor. Even Beatrice couldn't deny that I was the logical choice. But Beatrice didn't choose the logical option. She chose Mallory Finch. Mallory had been at Titan for exactly 14 months. She came from a marketing background with minimal technical training, hired through some diversity initiative that valued credentials over capability. Beatrice took one look at Mallory's impressive resume, bachelor's degree from a prestigious university, internship at a Fortune 500 company, all the right buzzwords, and decided she'd found her protégé. Never mind that Mallory couldn't calibrate a standard valve without supervision. Never mind that she'd never worked on anything more complex than basic assembly. Never mind that the other technicians had to constantly double-check her work, because her error rate was nearly 15%, astronomically high for aerospace manufacturing. Just 2 weeks before the Huntsville announcement, Mallory had nearly caused a major equipment failure. She'd been assigned a routine calibration on a test valve, simple work that any technician with 6 months of experience could handle. I was working 3 stations down when I heard the pressure alarm. I ran to her station. The valve housing was vibrating, the pressure gauge climbing into the red zone. Mallory stood frozen, staring at the controls. "Shut it down," I shouted. She didn't move. I shoved her aside and hit the emergency stop, then manually released the pressure valve. The hiss of escaping gas filled the room as the system depressurized safely. Another 30 seconds, and the housing would have ruptured, sending metal fragments across the production floor at lethal velocity. I checked her calibration settings. She'd reversed 2 parameters, creating a positive feedback loop that would have destroyed the equipment and possibly injured everyone in the vicinity. Russell, the senior technician, came running over. "What happened?" "Equipment malfunction," I said, covering for Mallory. "Pressure regulator glitch. I'll file the report." Mallory looked at me with gratitude and fear. She knew what she'd done, knew what could have happened, knew that I'd just protected her from the consequences of a mistake that should have gotten her immediately fired. "Thank you," she whispered. I filed the report as an equipment issue, not operator error. Beatrice never even asked about it. She signed off on the incident report without reading it, just like she signed off on everything else. None of that mattered to Beatrice. What mattered was that Mallory looked good in meetings, spoke confidently about subjects she barely understood, and most importantly, gave Beatrice all the credit for any successes while taking all the blame for any failures. She was the perfect puppet. Beatrice called me into her office on a Tuesday afternoon. The Huntsville position was already posted internally, and I'd submitted my application the day it went live. I'd spent hours on my cover letter, documenting every innovation, every efficiency improvement, every metric that proved I could handle the responsibility. Beatrice didn't even let me sit down. "I'm recommending Mallory for the Huntsville position," she said, not looking up from her computer. "She has the right background for a leadership role, fresh perspective, new ideas, that sort of thing." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Beatrice, I've been here 9 years. I've been essentially running this department." "You're an excellent technician," she interrupted, finally meeting my eyes. "But leadership requires a different skill set. Education, polish, strategic thinking. Mallory has an MBA, you have a technical certificate. I have 9 years of experience and a track record of innovations that have saved this company millions of dollars." Beatrice's smile was cold. "Innovations developed under my supervision and leadership. Your contributions are valued, Bryn, but you need to understand your place in the hierarchy. Not everyone is suited for advancement." I left her office shaking with rage. In the hallway, I ran into Mallory herself, practically bouncing with excitement. "Did you hear? Beatrice thinks I'm perfect for Huntsville. Can you believe it? This is exactly the kind of opportunity I've been hoping for." She didn't see my expression. She kept talking, describing her vision for the new facility, plans that were technically impossible and financially absurd. She was going to revolutionize aerospace manufacturing, she said, bring fresh thinking to an outdated industry. "What do you think?" she finally asked. "Do you have any advice?" Learn the actual work first, I said flatly. You can't lead people through processes you don't understand yourself. Her smile faltered. Beatrice says leadership is about vision, not technical details. Beatrice is wrong. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. That night, I sat in my apartment and stared at the certificates on my wall. 9 years of perfect attendance, 5 Employee of the Quarter awards, 3 Safety Excellence commendations, all of them meaningless compared to Mallory's prestigious degree and ability to parrot corporate jargon. I thought about quitting. I even drafted a resignation letter. But then I thought about the work itself, about the valves I'd spent nearly a decade perfecting, about the standards I'd maintained while Beatrice coasted on my efforts. If I left, who would maintain those standards? Who would ensure the work was done right? More importantly, why should I be the one to leave? I'd earned my place at Titan. I'd given them everything. If anyone should go, it was Beatrice. But I couldn't just accuse her of taking credit for my work. I had no documentation, no proof, no trail of emails or reports that showed where the ideas had really originated. Beatrice had been too careful for that. Every innovation had been presented as a collaborative effort, with her as the lead and me as the supportive team member. On paper, she looked like an exceptional manager who elevated her entire team. The reality was the opposite, but the reality didn't matter without evidence. I needed a different approach. Something that would reveal exactly how much Beatrice actually knew about the work she'd been taking credit for. Something that would demonstrate the gap between her reputation and her actual capabilities. The opportunity came 2 weeks later when Titan landed their biggest contract in company history. A 5-year deal with a major aerospace contractor to produce their next generation of matrix valves. The specifications were complex, pushing the boundaries of current technology. It would require innovations in metallurgy, calibration techniques, and quality control protocols. The executive team wanted a comprehensive proposal within a month. Beatrice immediately delegated the work to me while she prepared to present whatever I developed as her own strategic vision. It was the same pattern we'd followed for years, except this time, I had no intention of playing along. I worked on 2 proposals. The first was exactly what Beatrice expected: detailed, comprehensive, innovative, everything the executives would want to see. I put it together in a password-protected file and told Beatrice it would be ready the day before the big presentation. The second proposal was what I actually gave her. It looked perfect at first glance. Professional formatting, all the right technical terminology, impressive projections and timelines. But the actual content was gibberish. Calibration sequences that would destroy the equipment. Metallurgical combinations that were physically impossible. Quality control protocols that violated basic aerospace safety standards. Anyone with genuine expertise would recognize it as nonsense within minutes, but someone who'd been relying on others to do the actual thinking would see only what they expected to see. I sent it to Beatrice the evening before the presentation with a note about how excited I was about our proposal. She responded with a brief "looks good," without asking a single question about the technical details. She didn't understand any of it, just as I'd suspected. The presentation was scheduled for 10 in the morning. At 9:30, I sent an email to my personal account with the real proposal attached, along with a detailed timeline of every innovation I'd developed over the past 9 years and the documentation showing how Beatrice had presented each one as her own work. I'd been quietly compiling it for 2 weeks, digging through old project files and emails, building the case I should have built years ago. Then I went to the production floor and waited. Beatrice's presentation was spectacular in the worst possible way. She spoke with absolute confidence about calibration methods that would cause catastrophic equipment failure. She projected timelines based on processes that defied the laws of physics. She promised quality standards that were mutually contradictive. And she did it all with the polished professionalism that had convinced everyone she was an expert. As you can see on slide 7, Beatrice said, gesturing to a diagram I deliberately designed to be nonsensical. We'll implement a reverse phase calibration sequence that optimizes the thermal compression ratios. The chief engineer, a man named Roland Hayes, frowned. Reverse phase, that would create negative pressure in the valve chamber. Exactly, Beatrice said confidently. The negative pressure enhances the structural integrity. No, it would cause immediate system failure. The valve housing can't withstand negative pressure differentials above 0.2 atmospheres. This sequence would exceed negative 0.8. Beatrice hesitated, glancing at the slide. Well, that's where the metallurgical modifications come in. The metallurgical modifications on slide 9. The ones proposing a titanium aluminum alloy with 40% aluminum content. Yes, precisely. Roland's expression hardened. That's not an aerospace alloy. That's a structural alloy used in automotive manufacturing. It would fail catastrophically under the thermal stress of spacecraft operations. Did you even review these specifications before putting this presentation together? The questions started within minutes. Our quality director asked about the calibration sequence. Beatrice gave a vague answer about innovative approaches. The VP of Operations asked about the proposed testing protocols, which I'd deliberately written to contradict themselves in 3 different places. This testing sequence says we'll perform stress analysis at 500 degrees Celsius, but then specifies equipment rated for a maximum of 300 degrees, the VP said. How exactly do you propose we do that? We'll need to acquire new equipment, Beatrice said smoothly. Equipment that can handle 500 degrees. Exactly. But then on the next page, you propose final testing at 200 degrees. Why would we invest in high-temperature equipment for intermediate testing and then conduct final testing at lower temperatures? That's backwards. Beatrice shuffled through her notes. It's a multi-phase approach. It's nonsense, Roland interrupted. This entire proposal is technically illiterate. Miss Carrington, did you actually write any of this? The room went silent. Beatrice's face went pale. Of course I wrote it. Well, my team contributed. Who specifically? It was a collaborative effort. Who did the technical work? Beatrice hesitated just a moment too long. Bryn Sutton handled some of the preliminary specifications, but I developed the strategic framework. That's when I received the text I'd been waiting for. The VP's assistant, a woman named Holly who I'd helped train years ago and who'd never forgotten it, sent me a simple message. They want you upstairs. Now. I'd given Holly the real proposal that morning with a simple note, in case anyone asks what we actually should be doing. I trusted that if the presentation went as badly as I expected, she'd know what to do with it. The executive conference room was tense when I arrived. Beatrice was still there, looking like she wanted to disappear. The entire leadership team was arranged around the table, and my fake proposal was displayed on the screen behind them. Miss Sutton, the VP said, can you explain this proposal? Which one? I asked calmly. There's more than one. I pulled out my tablet and brought up the real proposal. There are 2. The one Miss Carrington presented, which is intentionally flawed, and the actual proposal for the contract, which I completed last week. The room erupted. Beatrice started to protest, but the VP cut her off with a gesture. Let's see the real one. I connected my tablet to the conference room display and began walking them through the specifications. The contract requires valves capable of operating at thermal ranges from -180 to +400 degrees Celsius. Standard titanium alloys can't handle that range. I'm proposing a new composite housing using a titanium-vanadium matrix with ceramic thermal barriers. Roland leaned forward. Ceramic barriers? That's innovative, but the bonding process. I've already tested 3 bonding methods. Plasma adhesion showed the best results, maintaining structural integrity through 200 thermal cycles without degradation. You've tested this already. On my own time, using the experimental equipment in Bay 7. I have complete documentation of the test protocols and results. I spent the next 45 minutes walking them through every detail. The metallurgical specifications, the calibration procedures, the quality control protocols. I answered every question with specific data, pulling up test results and performance analyses I'd compiled over the past month. When I finished, the chief engineer looked at Beatrice. You've been claiming credit for technical innovations you didn't understand, haven't you? Beatrice tried to salvage the situation. I supervised the development. Did you develop the calibration modification 3 years ago that reduced testing time by 40%? My team. Did you or did you not personally develop it? Silence. Roland pulled up something on his laptop. I'm looking at the original project file from that modification. There's a detailed technical write-up with timestamp metadata. It was created by Bryn Sutton. Your name was added to the document 3 hours later with no additional content. You just changed the author attribution. What about the diagnostic checklist that caught the supplier flaw 2 years ago, or the training protocol, or any of the dozens of improvements that have come out of your department? The chief engineer was relentless now, pulling up records on his laptop. Because I'm looking at your personnel file, and every single one of these innovations is attributed to your leadership. But I'm starting to think you couldn't explain the technical basis of any of them. The VP turned to me. Why did you create a false proposal? To demonstrate the truth, I said simply. For 9 years, I've developed innovations that Miss Carrington presented as her own work. I've run this department while she took credit for the results. I've maintained standards that she didn't understand well enough to evaluate. She's been recommending Mallory Finch for the Huntsville position because Miss Finch will continue that pattern, doing the work while someone else takes the credit. I needed to show you what happens when Miss Carrington actually has to demonstrate the expertise she's been claiming to have. This seemed like the most efficient way. This is absurd. Beatrice finally found her voice. She's a disgruntled employee trying to sabotage me because she didn't get a promotion she wasn't qualified for. Show me you're qualified for your own position, the VP interrupted. Explain the technical basis of the Delta Series valve construction, just the basics. Beatrice opened her mouth, then closed it. The Delta Series it's a high-precision valve system that uses advanced calibration techniques too. What kind of calibration techniques? Pressure-based calibration with thermal compensation. Every valve uses pressure-based calibration with thermal compensation, Roland said. What makes the Delta Series different? What's the specific technical innovation? Beatrice couldn't answer. She tried, stumbling through vague descriptions and incorrect terminology, but it was clear to everyone in the room that she didn't understand the fundamental technology her department worked with every single day. The Delta Series uses a multi-stage pressure regulation system, I said quietly. 3 independent valve chambers with cascading pressure differentials. The innovation is in the calibration sequence. Each chamber has to be calibrated in reverse order of operation to account for back pressure effects. It's counterintuitive, which is why most facilities can't implement it successfully. I developed the calibration protocol in my 2nd year here. The VP made a note, and Miss Carrington presented this as her own innovation. She received a $5,000 bonus and a promotion to senior lead based partially on that innovation. The meeting ended with Beatrice being suspended pending a full investigation. I was asked to return to work and maintain normal production while HR conducted interviews with the entire department. As I left the conference room, I passed Mallory in the hallway. She looked terrified, probably realizing that her path to advancement had just evaporated. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt tired. Back on the production floor, the other technicians were buzzing with speculation. Word had already spread that something dramatic had happened upstairs. I didn't explain, just returned to my station and started my afternoon work. The familiar hum of the machinery was comforting after the tension of the executive meeting. But I'd set something in motion that I couldn't stop, and I wasn't entirely sure where it would lead. I'd exposed Beatrice, yes, but I'd also exposed the fact that Titan's management had been fooled for years. That didn't reflect well on their judgment. I might have won the battle, but positioned myself as a threat to people who didn't like being made to look foolish. The investigation took 3 weeks. HR interviewed every technician in the department, reviewed years of project files and email records, compared the innovations attributed to Beatrice against her actual technical knowledge. They interviewed me 6 separate times, asking me to explain the development process for every major improvement from the past 9 years. During the third interview, the HR director, a serious man named Philip Montrose, set down his pen and looked at me directly. Walk me through the supplier incident from 2 years ago, the one where you identified the defective titanium alloy. I explained the spectrographic analysis, the aluminum content discrepancy, the potential failure mechanism, and Miss Carrington's role in this discovery. She wasn't involved in the discovery. I performed the routine quality check that flagged the issue, conducted the detailed analysis, and wrote the report to the supplier. But she received a commendation for identifying the defect. Yes. Philip pulled out a printed email. This is Miss Carrington's report to the VP of Procurement. It's written in first person, describing how she personally identified the issue during a routine review. There's no mention of you at all. He slid the email across the table. I read through it, seeing my technical analysis rewritten in Beatrice's voice, my discovery claimed as her vigilance. I have the original analysis report with my name and timestamp if you need it, I said. We've already pulled it from the archives. The metadata shows you created it at 7:15 a.m. Miss Carrington's email to procurement was sent at 11:30 a.m. the same day. She copied your analysis word for word and claimed it as her own work. Philip made another note. This pattern repeats with every innovation we've reviewed. Original technical work created by you, claimed and presented by Miss Carrington within hours or days. 9 years of systematic credit theft. They brought in external consultants to verify my technical claims. On a Thursday afternoon, 2 engineers from an independent aerospace firm arrived on the production floor. They spent 4 hours questioning me about valve design, calibration procedures, metallurgical properties, and quality control protocols. One of them, a woman named Diane Ramos, asked me to demonstrate the Delta Series calibration process. I walked her through every step, explaining the theory behind each adjustment, the tolerances we maintained, the common failure points, and how to avoid them. How long did it take you to develop this protocol? She asked. About 6 months of testing and refinement. The initial concept came from observing back pressure anomalies in the standard calibration sequence. I hypothesized that reversing the calibration order would compensate for those anomalies. And you tested this hypothesis how? I built a scale model using spare parts and ran calibration sequences in my garage. Once I had proof of concept, I requested permission to test on production equipment during off hours. Took another 3 months to optimize the sequence for different valve configurations. Diane exchanged a look with her colleague. This is graduate-level engineering work. You did this with a technical certificate and no formal engineering degree. The degree tells you what's theoretically possible. The hands-on work shows you what actually works. I learned the theory, but I learned the practice from experience. She made extensive notes, then asked about every other innovation attributed to Beatrice. I explained each one in detail, the technical challenges, my approach to solving them, the testing and refinement process. By the end, both consultants looked impressed and disturbed. Miss Carrington couldn't explain any of this when we questioned her, Diane's colleague said. She gave us generalities and management speak. You're giving us specific technical details with supporting data. The contrast is significant. The results were damning. Not a single innovation credited to Beatrice could be traced back to her actual work. Every one originated from me, or, in a few cases, from other technicians whose contributions she'd also appropriated. The training protocol I'd developed was being used at Titan facilities across the country, saving the company millions in onboarding costs, and Beatrice had received a $20,000 bonus for creating it. The diagnostic checklist had prevented a product recall that would have cost the company its reputation and possibly its primary contracts. Beatrice had been promoted partially on the strength of that achievement. The pattern was undeniable. For nearly a decade, Beatrice had been a facade, impressive on the surface, empty underneath, sustained entirely by the work of people she'd systematically exploited. Mallory's situation was more complicated. She genuinely believed she was qualified for the Huntsville position, because Beatrice had been telling her she was exceptional. The investigation revealed that Beatrice had been manipulating Mallory's performance reviews, hiding her mistakes, and inflating her contributions. Mallory wasn't malicious, just naive and overly confident because she'd been insulated from the consequences of her errors. During my final interview, the VP asked me directly, "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" It was a fair question. I'd thought about it constantly during the investigation. "I was raised to believe that good work speaks for itself," I said. "That integrity matters more than recognition." It took me too long to realize that staying silent about injustice isn't humble. It's just enabling the people who benefit from that injustice. The VP nodded slowly. "We failed you. A good manager should have recognized what was happening. The fact that this went on for 9 years is our failure as much as Carrington's." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd get from corporate leadership, and I accepted it. Beatrice was terminated. The official reason was performance inconsistent with position requirements, which was corporate speak for being exposed as a fraud. She tried to fight it, threatened legal action, claimed she was being scapegoated. But the documentation was overwhelming, and her own inability to demonstrate basic technical knowledge made any claim of competence impossible to sustain. Her lawyer sent a letter demanding a settlement conference. Titan's legal team responded with a detailed brief documenting every instance of credit theft, every misrepresentation, every false claim in her personnel file. They included statements from the independent consultants confirming that she lacked the technical expertise she'd claimed to possess. The lawsuit never materialized. Mallory was reassigned to a different department with intensive training and supervision. She'd been a pawn in Beatrice's game, and while she wasn't qualified for the role she'd been promised, that wasn't entirely her fault. With proper mentoring and realistic expectations, she might actually develop into a decent technician someday. As for me, I was offered the Huntsville position. I almost said no. The whole experience had left me cynical about corporate structures and the people who navigate them. I'd proven my worth, but I'd also learned that worth wasn't enough. You had to be willing to fight for recognition, even when fighting felt contrary to everything you'd been taught about humility and service. But then I thought about what I could build in Huntsville. A department where credit went to the people who actually did the work, where innovation was fostered rather than stolen, where technicians didn't have to choose between their values and their advancement. I accepted the position with one condition. I wanted full authority over hiring and personnel decisions. No more Mallorys being forced on me by executives impressed with resumes rather than capability. No more managers who couldn't do the work they were supposed to be supervising. They agreed. My last day in Wichita was strange. The production floor threw me a going-away party, which was touching but awkward. These people had watched me get exploited for years and said nothing. I understood why. Speaking up in a corporate environment has consequences, but part of me resented their silence. One of the senior technicians, a man named Russell who'd been at Titan even longer than Beatrice, pulled me aside during the party. "I should have said something," he told me. "We all should have. We knew what she was doing, but it was easier to keep our heads down and let you deal with it." I appreciated the honesty, even if it came too late to change anything. "Just don't let it happen to whoever comes next," I said. The transition to Huntsville took 2 months. I spent the time developing hiring protocols, technical standards, and training programs. I interviewed 73 candidates for 12 positions, choosing people who had the technical skills and the character I was looking for. No prestigious degrees unless they came with actual capability. No smooth talkers who couldn't back up their confidence with competence. Just solid technicians who took the work seriously and understood that precision matters when lives are at stake. One candidate, a young woman named Simone Fletcher, showed up to her interview with a portfolio of personal projects. She'd been building miniature valve systems in her apartment, testing different configurations, documenting her experiments with meticulous detail. "I know I don't have much professional experience," she said, "but I love this work. I want to understand it completely, not just go through the motions." I hired her on the spot. Another candidate, An older man named Alan Torres, who'd been laid off from a competing firm, demonstrated a calibration technique I'd never seen before during his practical test. "Where did you learn that approach?" I asked. "Developed it myself about 5 years ago. My old supervisor said it was too unconventional, told me to stick with standard procedures. But it works better, so I kept using it when no one was watching." I hired him too, and asked him to document his technique so we could implement it facility-wide. The Huntsville facility opened 6 months ago. We're 3 months ahead of schedule on the major contract and have 0 quality control flags on our production. Our efficiency numbers are 15% better than the projections, and our safety record is perfect. The other facilities are already asking about our methods, wanting to know what we're doing differently. What we're doing differently is simple. People get credit for their actual work. Innovation is rewarded. Expertise is respected. And anyone who tries to build a reputation on someone else's effort gets shown the door immediately. Last week, I received an email from Mallory. She's still at Titan, working in a different division, and apparently doing well with proper supervision and realistic expectations. She apologized for being part of the situation, even though she hadn't fully understood what was happening at the time. She said working with actual mentors who teach rather than exploit has shown her how dysfunctional her relationship with Beatrice really was. I appreciated the message, though I didn't respond right away. Some part of me is still processing everything that happened, still reconciling the values I was raised with against the reality of how workplace politics actually function. My parents are proud of me, of course. They came to visit the Huntsville facility last month, and my father spent 3 hours asking questions about the manufacturing process with genuine fascination. My mother met every member of my team and remembered all their names. Before they left, she pulled me aside. "You did the right thing," she said. "Standing up for yourself isn't the same as being arrogant. Understanding your worth isn't the same as being prideful. We taught you humility, but we never meant for you to let people take advantage of you." It was the permission I hadn't known I needed. The acknowledgement that my values and my actions weren't contradictory, just more complex than I'd understood them to be. I still think about that moment when I powered down the production cores. The symbolic weight of it, the statement it made. I'd built those systems, maintained them, improved them, and kept them running for 9 years. Beatrice had taken credit, but she couldn't have actually done any of it. When I left, the expertise left with me, and everyone finally had to acknowledge that truth. The new lead in Wichita is Russell, the technician who apologized during my going-away party. He's doing well from what I hear, maintaining the standards I established and giving credit where it's due. The department's efficiency has dropped slightly without me there, but that's to be expected. It'll recover as Russell grows into the role. I heard through the industry network that Beatrice tried to get another position at a competing aerospace company. They called Titan for references. She's currently working in an entirely different field, something in sales where technical expertise isn't required. I don't take pleasure in that, but I don't feel sorry for her either. She made choices, and those choices had consequences. That's just accountability. The Huntsville team is finalizing a new innovation this week, a modification to the valve coating process that should extend component lifespan by 30%. It was developed by Simone, the young technician who showed up to her interview with a portfolio of personal projects. I made sure Simone's name is on every document, every report, every presentation related to the innovation. When I present it to the executives next month, I'll be presenting her work, not mine. But unlike Beatrice, I'll make that absolutely clear. I'll explain exactly how Simone identified the problem, developed the solution, and tested the modifications. I'll recommend her for the recognition and the bonus. And if anyone tries to give me credit for managing the project, I'll redirect them to the person who actually did the work. The Huntsville facility just received another major contract. Our reputation for quality and reliability is growing, and our innovations are being recognized throughout the industry. This time, the recognition is going to the right people, the technicians and engineers who actually do the work, whose names are on the patents and the presentations and the awards. It's what Titan should have been all along, what every workplace should be. A meritocracy based on actual merit, not on who's best at claiming credit for others' achievements. 9 years of my life were spent building someone else's career. I can't get those years back. Can't undo the frustration and disappointment and self-doubt that came with watching someone else receive recognition for my work. But I can make sure those 9 years weren't wasted. I can use what I learned about workplace politics, about corporate structures, about the importance of documentation and the necessity of sometimes fighting for recognition to build something better. The production cores in Wichita are running again, maintained by technicians who deserve the credit they receive. The production cores in Huntsville are running at optimal efficiency, powered by a team that understands their worth and receives acknowledgement for their contributions. And somewhere, Beatrice is learning that you can't build a career on borrowed expertise forever. Eventually, someone will ask you to demonstrate what you claim to know, and if you can't, everything collapses. I powered down those cores 9 years ago when I started at Titan, learning the systems that would become my expertise. I powered them down again when I left, taking that expertise with me and leaving Beatrice with nothing but the hollow reputation I'd built for her. And I powered them up again in Huntsville, building something new on a foundation of honesty and fairness. The work continues. The valves still need to be constructed with precision and care. The innovations still need to be developed and tested and refined. The difference is that now, the people doing that work get to own their achievements. That's not revenge, that's just justice. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing to the Payback Office channel. We're building a community that believes in workplace accountability and the power of standing up for what's right. Your subscription helps us continue sharing these stories and reminds anyone watching that talent and integrity still matter. Join us as we work towards 7,000 subscribers and beyond.